recording. Okay. So last week we finished off talking about the period of time, famous period of time when Rabban Gamliel was the Nasi, and he was rather harsh towards Rabbi Yehoshua, made him come on the day that he thought it was Yom Kippur with his staff and his money, and he was deposed as Nasi temporarily, and he was replaced with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who then became white overnight, and I can understand that, how he became white overnight, taking on the presidency. I used to have hair before I became the president of the shul. Now look at me. Anyway, so we talked about that last week, and they were very famous stories of how it worked in the Bet Din. Now, what struck me as we were talking about that last week, just before we go back to our Gemarah, what struck me is how things have changed. And we did touch on it last week, in that Rabban Gamliel, when he wasn't Nasi, was prepared to go and sit and study under the new Nasi. He didn't throw his toys out the pram or go and try and leak things to the press about his successor or any of those things. He took it in good faith, and in fact he took on board the criticisms that were made against him, that he was harsh and that he was out of touch with his flock. He didn't even know that Rabbi Yehoshua was a blacksmith. Sharon told us all about that story last week. He didn't even know. When he got there and he saw the soot in his house, in Rabbi Yeshua's house, he was shocked. So he took it on board. And it struck me as how different we are today in society. Once somebody has been deposed for whatever reason, that's it. You're done for. There's no way back. And in fact, we were having, Elisheva and I were having a discussion this morning on our walk about just this kind of thing with regard to this chap Chaim Wald, who apparently committed suicide a few days ago. He was a man who had written very many excellent books called Kids Speak and Adults Speak. They were books for the Haredi community, which were very well received. My kids read them, and they were extremely good and extremely helpful. He was then accused of some heinous crimes, of abuse against children and women and men, I think, as well. And before it all came to trial and what have you, he apparently committed suicide. And there's been then talk of removing all his books from the bookshelves. Nobody will sell the books anymore. Everyone's been told to take them off their bookshelves and throw them away. And this is not for now, because this is a Gemarah share, but it's just the thought process that I'm sharing with you. I'm not so sure that's right. I'm not so sure that this cancel culture, where the good things that a person has done are automatically trashed because of bad things that they do, either before, during, or after. The whole business with Cecil Rhodes at Oxford University comes to mind as well. It's not for now, but perhaps it's a debate that we ought to have, because it struck me that had Rabban Gamliel been alive today, and had he been in the position of Nesiut today and been deposed, there would have been no way back for him. There would have been no way that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would have stood aside for him to return, having done his appropriate tshuva. I don't think that there would have been any way back for him, and it just struck me that that's something which perhaps we need to debate. Yes, Julia.
I don't honestly know whether the two examples you use are comparable. One really just involves the rabbi having been a difficult head. The other, would you consider the same approach if it was Rolf Harris or Jimmy Savile? I doubt if you would.
You're right. It's a very difficult subject. I mean, Jimmy Savile was a monster, but you can't deny that there are many people that benefited a great deal from things that he did. The amount of money he raised for charities, etc., etc. I don't want to get into that debate right now. It's a difficult subject. I'm just uncomfortable with blanket cancel culture, and I think it would be an interesting topic, I think, to debate. And maybe I'll try and put something together. Maybe I'll put my head above the parapet and make a presentation on this, and then everybody can shoot me down. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Right, let's do some Gemarah. I don't even know how we got. Oh yes, I know how we got onto that. Rabban Gamliel. Yeah, Rabban Gamliel would have had no chance of coming back, but he did come back, and he remained the great Rabban Gamliel. And despite the fact that he was out of touch and did some very harsh things, which were reversed, he wasn't cancelled. That's where we got to with that. Right, let's go to our Gemarah. We're back in Sanhedrin finally after a few weeks. Let me share the screen with you. There it is.
Johnny, our friend Nathan Slivkin has come back.
Yes,
Johnny.
well, not really. Not really, Johnny. He's not come back in the society that kicked him out.
Well, with some of them, yeah, they've apologised, a lot of them.
I think you'll find that that's a very small number, and I don't think you'll find him on the invitation list to the Siyum Hashas at Madison Square Garden. More's the pity. Right, here we go. You've got the screen. You can see the Gemarah on the screen, yeah? Okay, those of you who are following in the hard copy Steinsaltz, it's on page 58. Those of you who are in a big boys Gemarah, it's on 11b. And we're over here at our little symbol, which tells us that this is a place to stop and to a slightly new subject. It's not entirely new because we're still talking about the things which cause the year to be intercalated. In other words, for the year to be 13 months. And we spoke before we digressed into Rabban Gamliel, we were speaking about things which were not the biggies, but were supportive reasons. And a little bit above the page, it was, if I remember rightly, if it was that when the doves were not yet big enough so that the women could bring their turtle doves after birth, giving birth. And also we talked about whether the kids and the lambs were going to be sufficiently grown for Korban Pesach. Those were sort of subsidiary reasons, that's the word. But here we're going to discuss now basically the three biggies. These are the three main reasons why the Nasi would choose to intercalate a year. So we're over here. Tanu Rabbanan. The rabbis taught us. Al shlosha dvarim ma'abrin et hashana. For three things, they will intercalate the year. Al ha'aviv, on the spring, va'al peirot ha'ilan, and on the fruit of the trees, va'al hatakufa. I'm not going to translate that just now. We'll come back to it. Okay, so let's go take them one at a time. Let's take them one at a time. What is this Aviv? Why would the spring be something to make the year be intercalated? This is the most famous of all. Yes, Johnny?
Pesach.
Pesach. And how do we know that Pesach has to be in the spring? We've been saying for weeks, haven't we, that Pesach needs to be in the spring. But how do we know that? Where do we know it from? Yes, Ronnie.
The Omer offering. And therefore we have to be able to cut the Omer.
Okay.
The barley.
Yes, that is true. That is absolutely true. We do have to cut the barley, and therefore, but that's a corollary of it being in the spring, and you're absolutely right. However, there is an absolute direct reference to Pesach being in the spring. Anybody know where that reference is before I show it to you?
Talks about Chodesh Aviv.
It does exactly talk about Chodesh Aviv. Do you know where that is?
No. Can't
Okay.
remember.
David Marks will tell us right now.
More it's Chodesh Aviv, v'asita Pesach Hashem Parashat Re'eh.
Parashat Re'eh, right at the end of Parashat Re'eh, if I'm not mistaken. There it is on the screen for you. Let me just get it straight. There you go. Can you see that? Chapter 16 of Dvarim, verse 1. I'm sure, Leon, you had this already, didn't you?
Yep.
Yeah, thought you would. Leon's a mind reader, by the way. You know, I don't have conversations with Leon beforehand. He just knows exactly what I'm going to have on the screen. Off you go, Leon. Verse 1.
You shall observe the month of springtime and perform the Pesach offering for Hashem, your God. For in the month of springtime, Hashem, your God, took you out of Egypt at night.
Okay, there you go. So there we are. You couldn't get any more explicit than that. Shmor et chodesh ha'aviv v'asita Pesach l'Adonai Elohecha. So there you go. So Aviv, the month of spring, that has to be at Pesach time. So that, of course, is the number one reason why the year would be intercalated. So that's very clear. Now, what else did I get ready here? I got ready here something else here. What was all this about? Oh, yes, that's a different one. That's the next one. Right. Okay, let's go back to the Gemarah then. Stop that share and start another share. Back to the Gemarah. Okay, so that was Aviv, the springtime. Va'al peirot ha'ilan. And another reason why the year might be intercalated is the fruit of the tree. What's that talking about? Fruit of the tree. Why might that be a reason to intercalate the year?
You have to take it to Yerushalayim.
Yes, Johnny, you do have to take it to Yerushalayim. And what is that called?
One of the offerings.
It is one of the offerings,
Yeah.
correct. Yes, Ronnie.
Bikurim.
Bikurim, exactly, Bikurim. The first fruits. It's the same root of the word. Of course, I'm sure you know this. It's the same root as Bechor, being a firstborn. Bechor, Bet Chaf Resh. So Bikurim is the first fruits. Now, Johnny, what do you actually do with these first fruits?
Take them to Yerushalayim, you offer them up. I think, does the Kohen get some and the poor people get some? Or the poor people?
You take them to Yerushalayim and
You give them to the
you
Kohen?
give them to a Kohen in a basket.
Yeah.
Or if you're very rich, you put it on a silver platter and you give it to the Kohen. And that is and there is, of course, a very famous declaration that you have to make when you give these first fruits, which is also connected with what we just spoke about. Anybody remember what the declaration, which is called vidui, is when you bring your bikurim to the Bet HaMikdash and you give them to the Kohen and you make a declaration. And what is it that you say? Anybody?
Shechianu?
You probably would say a shechianu, yes, but that's not what the Torah tells us.
Does it say something about my father was a slave or
Yes,
an idol worshiper or something?
Yes, absolutely correct. we say the declaration that we read in the Haggadah every year, Arami Oved Avi. My father was a wandering Aramean, and he came down to Egypt, and God took us out, and he brought us to this wonderful land. And here, look, Hashem, I've brought you my first fruits. So that's declaration, which is in Sefer Dvarim. It is said by the person bringing the Bikurim. We, of course, know it and from the Haggadah, Arami Oved Avi. It's right towards the beginning, and we've not yet fallen asleep at the Seder, so we all remember that bit. And that's the same declaration that is made when the Bikurim, the first fruits, are brought to the temple. Okay, big deal. What's that got to do with us? When is it that those first fruits are meant to be brought to the Bet HaMikdash?
Shavuot.
Shavuot is the first time that they can be brought. There is a period of time that Bikurim can be brought. You can't bring them before Shavuot. Now, you can't bring them after. When's the latest time you have to bring them? Anyone know? So the time for bringing Bikurim starts at Shavuot. Ronnie, when's it end?
Sukkot.
No, you can bring them at Sukkot. It's not the last time.
Oh, no.
The final time, your last call for Bikurim is Chanukah. So what's that got to do with our Gemarah? Why would the fruit on the trees be a reason to delay the year and to intercalate the year? Well, the answer is quite simple. If the trees, if the fruit has not yet ripened by Shavuot, then those who want to bring their Bikurim at the first possible opportunity, which is Shavuot, which is when you're meant to bring it, because of course, Zrizim Makdimim La Mitzvot, people who are enthusiastic will do the mitzvah at the first possible opportunity. Secondly, there is a reason why Shavuot is connected with the first fruits. Would anybody like to suggest a reason why I say that? Anyone? Another name for Shavuot? Chag
Bikurim.
Chag HaBikurim. Chag HaBikurim. It's called the Festival of the First Fruits. Okay, and so that's where.
Also, Chag HaAsif.
Chag HaAsif is Sukkot.
Sorry.
Chag HaAsif is Sukkot. Chag HaBikurim, Chag HaKatzir is another name for Shavuot, and also Chag HaBikurim. Chag HaKatzir is the harvest festival. When you first start you cut down the wheat, which is why on Shavuot we have a special offering that we bring on Shavuot. Can anybody remember what that special offering is, apart from Bikurim? A special offering that we only bring on Shavuot?
Omer.
No, the Omer is brought on Pesach, the second day of Pesach.
Barley?
No, the barley is the Omer that we bring on the second day of Pesach. What do we bring on Shavuot?
Shtei Alechem.
Shtei Alechem, correct. The two special loaves, which are made of what? What are those loaves made of that we were special offering that we bring on Shavuot? You see, if we lived...
Is wheat.
The wheat?
Is
Wheat, correct, wheat. See, if we lived 2,000 years ago, we would know that we brought the offering of the two loaves just as much as we would know that we eat matzah on Pesach and that we bring a lulav and etrog on Sukkot. We know that like instinctively on the top of our head. because we do that all the time. Sadly, because we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, we don't bring this Shtei HaLechem, so we don't know about it really. And it's one of the reasons why Shavuot is the sort of poor relative of the Shalosh Regalim. I remember when I was at school, there were kids that would not go to school on Pesach and not go to school on Sukkot, but they'd go to school on Shavuot because it didn't really count, because it was like a nothing holiday for them. And that's because, sadly, the things that are connected to Shavuot, certainly in Chutz La'aretz at least, we don't have any opportunity to do it. We don't have the Beit HaMikdash, so we can't bring the Shtei HaLechem, we can't bring these 2 loaves. We don't have the Beit HaMikdash, so we can't bring our first fruits. Here in Israel, the kids make a big fuss of the agricultural side of things, and the kibbutzim, and we've spoken about this in the past, the kibbutzim use the festivals as their agricultural awareness festivals. But in Chutz La'aretz, Shavuot had to be sort of, we had to manufacture something for Shavuot, which was Matan Torah, to bolt it on so that we didn't lose Shavuot. I'm digressing a bit, but anyway, so Shavuot, we have the special, we have the 2 special offerings. We have the Shtei HaLechem, which must be brought on Shavuot, and that's made of wheat. And the reason for that is because that is when the first wheat harvest is, and that's why it's called Chag HaKatzir, the festival of cutting down of the harvesting of the wheat. And it's also called Chag HaBikurim, the festival of the first fruits, because that's when we bring the first fruits, which here I'm going to show you, share the screen with you now, and just to show you what we're talking about over here. Here we go. This is what Nachum was referring to. It is in Sefer Dvarim. There we go. It's in chapter 26. Have a look at this, chapter 26. Leon, if you're with us, this is what you do when you bring your first fruits. And the time to bring it, if you can, is on Shavuot. Chapter 26.
Verse 2.
Start with verse 1 and go through to verse 5.
It will be when you enter the land that Hashem your God gives you an inheritance, and you possess it, and you dwell in it, that you shall take the first of every fruit of the ground that you bring in from your land that Hashem God gives you, and you shall put it in a basket and go to the place that Hashem your God will choose to make his name rest there. You shall come to whomever will be the Cohen in those days, and you shall say to him, I declare today to Hashem your God that I have come to the land that Hashem swore to our forefathers to give us. The Cohen shall take the basket from your hand and lay it before the altar of Hashem your God. Then you shall call out and say before Hashem your God, an Aramean tried to destroy my forefather. He descended to Egypt and sojourned there, few in number, and there he became a nation, great, strong, and numerous.
Okay, let's stop there. This is the verse that I wanted, those few verses are what I wanted to show you. That's what you do when you take your first fruits. And there in verse 5, of where my pointer is now, that's where our declaration begins, that you're all so familiar with from the Haggadah. Arami oved aviv vayered Mitzrayim vayagor sham b'mtei ma'at vayhi sham lagoy gadol atzum varav. Okay, and then of course in the Haggadah we go off and start darshaning what it means atzum varav, numerous and mighty, and we have all those signs, and then we go off into explanations of this pasuk. But that pasuk that we quote in the Haggadah is from here, the declaration when you bring the first fruit. Now, why am I stressing this so much? Because I think that there is a reason, and again I'm digressing, but this is a Gemarah shir, so you're allowed to digress because the Gemarah goes off in all sorts of tangents. So why shouldn't we? So I think there's a reason why the Baal Haggadah the person who wrote the Haggadah, whoever that was, we don't actually know who put the Haggadah together, but whoever it was, I think, used this declaration in the Haggadah, not just because it's the beginning of our history, but because I think that it's hinting to us, and it's hinting to us even more, I think, for people who have lived in the diaspora, and certainly for people who lived in the diaspora before we were able to return to our land. It's hinting to us that the entire process of being taken out of Egypt was not just so that we should wander around the desert for 40 years, but that we should actually come to the land of Israel, and that we should be here in the land of Israel, working the land of Israel, recognizing the greatness of God for bringing us to the land, and recognizing that what we are celebrating on Seder night was only the beginning of a process. Although we say that we have a mitzvah to remember Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, Kol Yemei Chayecha, all the days of your life. I'm going to the Haggadah again, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who we spoke about last week. All the days of your life, night and day, we have to say Shema Yisrael, which mentions Yetziat Mitzrayim. Yetziat Mitzrayim, although it's the most important event at the beginning of our history, it's not the end point. The end point is when you come on Shavuot, you come to the Beit HaMikdash and you declare, look at what you say, V'yigadati hayom, I declare today, L'Hashem Elokecha, ki vati al haaretz, I have come to the land. Which land? Asher nishba Adonai l'avoteinu latet lanu, the land that God swore to our fathers to give us. This is a declaration that says this was the entire raison d'etre of everything that we've done up until this point. So Abraham was promised children and the land. Passed that bracha to Yitzchak, to Yaakov, through to the Bnei Yisrael. And me, Mr. Farmer, who comes with my basket full of fruit, I am fulfilling I am the fulfillment. I am the culmination of that bracha given to Abraham Avinu. So I don't think it's any coincidence that the Baal Haggadah chose the declaration that we make on Shavuot, not on Pesach. We make this declaration on Shavuot, but the declaration is that this is what it's all about. I declare to this day that I have come to the land which Hashem swore to our fathers, and then we go into that declaration. So
Johnny, may
yes,
I share something from my family?
Yes, please do, Sharon.
Because I'm not from Manchester, so we had a different tradition. We had on Shavuot a Shavuot Seder, and on the second day, and at the Seder we would drink four glasses of milk, and the table was decorated with the fruit and the grain, and not like Tu B'Shvat, but really about what was in the basket. And it was taught to us, and it was a long Seder too. And it was taught to us that the Exodus was the liberation, but that liberation without the discipline of the law was nothing. And so coming into the land and the celebration of the land was tied to Pesach, in that freedom without law, which leads to justice, which leads to a sharing of the produce of the land by all, is not freedom that is worth celebrating. It's only really comes to the conclusion of the concept, and again, coming into a land and creating a place of justice on Shavuot.
I love it. I absolutely love it, Sharon. You're going to have to spend some time with me, giving me the details of the Shavuot Seder, and Bli Neder, without making any promises that I might not keep. I would like to do a presentation with you before Shavuot, so you can teach us all about that. That sounds like a wonderful idea. It certainly sounds very much like the Seder Tu B'Shvat, which we are going to be celebrating in a couple of weeks. We will be having a Seder Tu B'Shvat in our shul. And those of you who read the Torah tidbits, for the Tu B'Shvat issue, I have an article in the Torah tidbits on Seder Tu B'Shvat. At least that's what they've said. They're going to publish it anyway. We'll see whether they actually do. That will be the first Chelet article in Torah tidbits, which hopefully we can repeat. But I'm going to be talking about the Seder Tu B'Shvat in there. But the Seder of Shavuot with 4 glasses of milk, and the Shivat Aminim, the 7 species. That sounds like a wonderful idea. So Sharon, please remind me later in the year that we have to do that, because that sounds a wonderful idea. But the idea that you're saying, of course, the second part of what you said, it fits in with what I was saying before, that the culmination is that we have come to the land. And of course, as you say, the idea of having a land which is full of justice and truth is what we are all about. Excellent. Thank you for that. Now then, how did we get onto that? Let's go back to the Gemarah. Let's go back to the Gemarah. Where is it? There it is. Right. So that's the second reason. Oh, no, we haven't said the reason yet. So the reason is, the reason why the fruits being unripened, or not yet ripened, let's say, is a reason to intercalate the year, is quite simply because you don't want to be bringing unripe fruits on Shavuot. Now, you could say, well, it doesn't matter, does it? Because you've got all the way until Chanukah to bring your fruits. And that is an opinion that says, well, okay, well, you know, this is not such an important thing, the fruits being ripe, because you can bring it all the way through to Chanukah. And you can certainly bring it on Sukkot. The problem, of course, is this. It is not that easy to get to Yerushalayim, even today, from some parts of Israel, what with the traffic and what have you. On foot or on donkey, it was difficult to get to Yerushalayim for farmers. And they didn't just go every Monday and Thursday to Yerushalayim. It was a big effort, and they would, generally speaking, go 3 times a year, as they were required to do by the Torah on the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 foot festivals. That's, of course, why they're called Shalosh Regalim. They're the 3 festivals which you get on your feet and you go to Yerushalayim. Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. So generally speaking, you only went on those 3 times. Now, if your first fruits are ripe by Shavuot, which they should be, if Shavuot is in the right time of the year, then when you go to the temple, when you go to the Bet HaMikdash on Shavuot, because you're going anyway, you bring your first fruits with you. It was a bit like a couple of weeks ago when we discussed about the lady who had a baby and had to bring the turtle doves. She wouldn't go make a special trip because it was too arduous. She would wait until the next of the Shalosh Regalim, and she would do it at the same time. The same thing here. Bikurim is connected to Shavuot. Number 1, we said you should do the mitzvah at the first possible opportunity. And number 2, the Torah recognizes that it's difficult to get to Yerushalayim. So if you miss Shavuot because your first fruits are not yet ripe, probably the next time you'll go is Sukkot. Well, you've got a bit of a problem there, because if you're not going till Sukkot, and let's say these fruits ripen just after Shavuot and you miss it, you've then got a bit of a wait till Sukkot, and the fruit could go off, right? We didn't have freezers or even fridges, really. So it was a problem. You had to think about these things. So the Bet Din, the Sanhedrin, would say, well, okay, if the fruits are not going to be ripe in time for people to take their bikurim to Yerushalayim on Shavuot, that's a good enough reason to intercalate the year. And that is number 2 in our list. Number 1 was Aviv, because we have a pasuk that tells us Shmor et Chodesh Aviv va'asita Pesach. And the second reason is that the Peirot Ha'ilan, the fruit of the trees, have to be ready for the farmers to take Bikurim to Yerushalayim. Okay, any questions so far on what we've done so far on that?
Which Bikurim do they have to take them from? The Pesach fruits, or if they went up to Hanukkah time, it definitely wouldn't be good fruit.
Correct.
Right then.
Yeah, I mean, well, that depends on the fruits, of course. I mean, because some of the fruits ripen later. So, for instance, the citrus fruits that are on the trees at the moment,
Right.
grapefruits and oranges and kumquats and all that lot, they're ripe now, aren't they? So, you know, the first fruits would have just been in time for Hanukkah of those fruits. So the main fruits that we're talking about, of course, that you take Bikurim from are what? What do you take Bikurim from? Is it all fruits? Yes, Ronnie.
Shivas Aminim.
Okay, and where would you find a list of the Shivat Aminim?
Well, there is a pasuk which I'm sure you've got at your fingertips. I don't.
Okay, well, I'm sure that David's got it at his fingertips. Where is it, David?
Beginning of Parashat Eikev.
There it is, on the screen for you, on cue. It's in chapter 8 of Devarim, in Parashat Eikev. Ki Hashem Elokecha meviacha al eretz tova. Your God will bring you, or is bringing you, to a land, a good land, eretz tova, eretz nachalei mayim, a land of rivers of water, ayanot, fountains, utohomot, and depths, yotzim babikau vahar, that emerge from the valleys and the mountains. And where we go, verse 8, Leon. I was just getting you warmed up.
Yes. A land of wheat, barley, grape, fig, and pomegranate. A land of oil, olives, and date honey.
There we go. Those are the Shivat Aminim. Gefen, Seora, Achita, Seora, Gefen, Teina, Rimon, Zeit, Shemin, Dvash. Dvash being honey is not bees honey. Dvash is date honey. So Dvash is dates.
Johnny, I have a question.
Yes.
It's slightly outdated by a minute or two, but here's the question. You say that the last opportunity was Hanukkah, which sort of, my question is it Hanukkah or was it really Sukkot? Because somewhere I learned that Hanukkah was 8 days because the war was going on during Sukkot, and therefore they celebrated it late by making Hanukkah 8 days. Would it actually be Hanukkah, or since it isn't mentioned in the Torah, would it actually have been Sukkot, but it was moved ahead since this was post-Hasmonean conquest?
Okay, so that's a good question, and I will quote to you from the Art Scroll Gemarah notes at the bottom of the page. Those of you who've got an Art Scroll Gemarah in front of you, you'll find it on 11b1 at the bottom in note number 9, and I shall read it out. So I'll read the whole thing because actually it's interesting. The Torah commands that in Eretz Yisrael, a farmer must bring the first fruits of the 7 species of produce to the temple, which we just said, give them to the Kohen on duty, and recite verses of thanksgiving. Now we've gone through that. And then it tells you what the 7 species are, which we've just done. The earliest time for one to fulfill this obligation is Shavuot, for the Torah calls Shavuot Yom HaBikurim, the day of the first fruits. It's also a convenient time for people living outside Jerusalem to bring their first fruits, since they'll be traveling to the temple for the festival anyway. Therefore, if the fruits will not ripen before Shavuot, the court considers proclaiming a leap year. That's what we've done so far. Now, here comes the answer to your question, Sharon. Meiri questions the importance of the fruits ripening before Shavuot. He notes that even if the first fruits are unripe on Shavuot, they may still be brought at the next festival, Sukkot. Still, he explains, the court does consider proclaiming a leap year if the produce will be unripe on Shavuot, for if that happens, some types of fruit might still be unripe on Sukkot, because of course, if Shavuot is early, Sukkot is also early. People will then have to make a special trip to the temple to bring those fruits between Sukkot and Hanukkah, which is the latest time when Bikurim may be brought. So it seems that the halacha is that you can bring it all the way up to Hanukkah, but the usual times to bring it would be Shavuot and Sukkot. But you're absolutely right, of course, that Hanukkah is 8 days because of the 8 days of Sukkot, because that particular year when the Hashmonaim rededicated the temple, there was no Sukkot that year. There were no offerings on Sukkot because the temple was in a state of impurity and was under the control of the Greeks. When it was liberated and purified, they then had 8 days of rededication at Hanukkah. The 8 days being for two reasons: one, because the original dedication of the temple took 8 days, and so this was a copy of that. And secondly, what we call tashlumim, and I don't mean like installments of payments, which is what the modern Hebrew word tashlumim means. Tashlumim means making up for. So making up for the fact that you couldn't do Sukkot that year, they did all the Sukkot offerings on Hanukkah. So you're absolutely right that Hanukkah and Sukkot are connected, but it seems that the halacha is that if you need to, you can bring your Bikurim all the way up to Hanukkah. Okay, so there we go. There is the 7. Somebody saying something? No. Okay. There are on the screen your Shivat Haminim, the seven types that we have to bring Bikurim for, and there we go. Right. So let's go back to the Gemarah again and see what the third of the 3 major time reasons for intercalation are. First one was the spring. Second one was the fruit being not ripe, ready for Bikurim. And the third one, which I didn't translate, was al-ha-tekufah. Now, the Hebrew word tekufah means what in modern Hebrew?
Season.
What do you say, David?
Can you read it?
No.
I don't see it.
Season.
Season. Okay. Tkufa can mean season. It can also mean a period of time. So you would talk about the, I don't know, Tkufat HaTanaim, the time period that the Tanaim lived in. So Tkufa is a time period. And it also means a season. That's correct. Anybody know the root of that word? Can't hear you, David, but I think I read your lips correctly.
Takif.
Lahakif, yes. Lahakif means to surround.
Strengthen.
No,
Hakafot,
lahakif,
yeah.
to surround. Same word that we use on Simchat Torah, hakafot. What do we do on hakafot?
Dance round.
We go round and round. So a tkufa is a period. Why is it a period of time or a season? Because the sun goes round the earth. No, the sun doesn't go around the earth. The earth goes round the sun. It's a seasons come in a circular fashion. So tkufa, the word tkufa is from the word lahakif, to surround or to go around, as in hakafot. So the tkufa here, the word tkufa here is referring to the equinox. What's the equinox? Who knows a bit of Latin?
It's
Leon,
when night
you must
and
have done
the day
Latin
are,
at school. Go on, Sharon.
night and day are equal.
Correct. Equi. The word equi as in equal.
And
And
nox
not-
is
Yeah. So the equinox is the point at which the season changes. It's the time when things are equal. Now, there are, how many equinoxes are there in the year?
4.
4. Who said 4?
I did, Leon.
Go on, Leon.
Well, there's the winter equinox, the summer equinox, and they're called solstices, I think. The spring and the autumn equinox.
Okay, so there are 2 equinoxes in the year. The other 2 that you're referring to, because I know where you've got that from, you've been reading note number 10 here in your art scroll Gemarah, which talks about the 4, you're quite right, but only 2 of them are actually equinoxes.
Right.
Because if you think about it, where the equinox is where the day and the day and the night are equal. Okay, so it's the turn of the year. So there's the equinox in the and there are 4 kufot. There are 4 of those periods, but the word equinox, there can only be 2 of them. If we have a look over here, we have to understand that the Jewish year, the Jewish calendar, not the Jewish year, the Jewish calendar is based on the lunar year, the lunar calendar, the months, right? The moon. So a month is 29.5 days. That's how long it takes approximately for the moon to fully rotate around the earth. That's the calendar. The Jewish calendar is based on lunar months, which is why we have Pesach on the 14th of Nisan, we have Shavuot on the 6th of Sivan, etc. But the year, the Jewish year, not the Jewish calendar, the Jewish year is a solar year. How do we know? Because we've just said so, haven't we? Pesach has to be in the spring. So he describes it here that there's a note in the art scroll which uses a really interesting expression, and he calls the Jewish year a luni-solar year. Not loony as in lunatic, but loony as in lunar. Luni-solar, a luni-solar system. So in other words, the Jewish system is based on both the lunar calendar and the solar year. And that's why we need this Gemarah to tell us all the shenanigans about intercalating a year. If we were Muslims, God forbid, we would have a pure lunar system. Their chagim are based entirely on the lunar system, and so therefore their holiday, for example, of Eid and Ramadan moves 11 days back in the solar year every year. So within 3 years, it's moved back a month. Work it out. Within 36 years, no, within 18 years, it's moved back 6 months. So every 18 years, Ramadan is 6 months apart from where it was. So if you start Ramadan, and that's why they don't like it when Ramadan's in the summer, because of course they have to fast during the daylight hours. So if you're in the northern hemisphere and Ramadan is in the summer, they have to fast for 20 hours of the day for a month. It's not fun, I wouldn't imagine, not tried it, but whereas they like it when Ramadan is in the winter, because the days are shorter and therefore the fast is shorter. It's like for us, we have a Asara B'Tevet. It's a nice easy fast, isn't it? It's finished by 4 o'clock, 4:30. Whereas Tisha B'Av or worse still, Shiva Asa B'Tammuz, which is bang in the middle of the summer, that's a tough one because certainly in in England at least, it doesn't go out till nearly 11 o'clock in some places, and if you're in Scotland, it's even after that. It's after 11 o'clock. It's a tough one. So our calendar is not purely lunar and not purely solar. It's a mixture of the two. And the tkufot, these turning points, Sukkot has to be before the autumnal equinox. Okay, so Sukkot has to be before the autumnal equinox, and that's part of this luni-solar system that we have. So although we don't actually have a pasuk like we do for Pesach that specifies Shmo et Chodesh ha'asif, we do have the idea that Sukkot is called, and I think Nechama mentioned this earlier, Sukkot is called Chag ha'asif. What is asif? The gathering in. It's the gathering in. It's the harvest festival, not the harvest festival as in Chag HaKatsir, where we cut down the first wheat that's ready and we make our 2 loaves of bread. But no, this is Chag HaAsif, when we bring in all our produce at the end of the growing cycle, ready for the coming winter. So Sukkot has to be at that time. It has to be in the before the autumnal equinox, and therefore that is the third reason why the year might be intercalated, the third main reason. Now, it's not coincidence, is it, that each one of those reasons is connected with one of the Shalosh Regalim. Aviv, Pesach, Peirot Ha'ilan is Bikurim, Shavuot. Hatkufa, the equinox, is all about Sukkot. So what this is telling us is that for us, I'll come to you in a sec, Ronnie. For us, the main, well, I say us, I mean us Jews who are basically spent most of our lives in the Galut. That might exclude Nechama, but I don't think it excludes any of the others of us. Most of us have spent most of our lives in the Galut, not really connecting with the land of Israel. So that means that the 3 main festivals for us were, if I say to you, what's Pesach all about, Leon? You'll say?
Matzah.
You'll say it's Exodus from Egypt, right? If I was to say to you, Johnny, what's Shavuot all about? You'd say Matan Torah, no, right? You'd say the giving of the Torah. And if I said to you, what's Sukkot all about? You'd say shaking the lulav, sitting in the sukkah, right? Because God made us sit Sukkot on the way out of Egypt. Ki hoshafti et bnei Israel b'Sukkot. But actually, as we know, there's another parallel track going on here with these Shalosh Regalim, which is agricultural. Pesach is the Omer, like we mentioned. Why do we start counting the Omer on the 2nd day of Pesach? Because that's when the Omer offering, the first barley, was brought. So if you were to say to a farmer in Eretz Israel, particularly a secular farmer in the kibbutz system, for example, of 100 years ago, what does Pesach mean to you? They would say, they wouldn't say the Exodus from Egypt, they would say the barley harvest. And what does Shavuot mean to you? The wheat harvest. And what does Sukkot mean to you? The harvest where we're bringing in our produce. So you can see from our Gemarah that the 3 main reasons that the rabbis got involved with extending the year and intercalating the year was all to do with the agricultural nature of society in Eretz Israel. And of course, that's how it was meant to be. That is what the Torah tells us the whole time. When I'll bring you to the land and you'll have these fruits, and this is what you must do, and you must bring, etc., etc. So we can see from here the primacy of the agricultural year in Judaism. Now, most of us, even those of us that now do live in Eretz Israel, don't get involved in too much farming. Some of us have got, fruit trees, and some of us will grow vegetables and what have you in our gardens. My wife's busy doing it hydroponically this year because of Shemitah. But, it's a bit of a hobby. It's not, for most of us, our mainstay of our activities. But we need to remember that at the time when this was going on, the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, they're referring to times in Eretz Yisrael when that was a major part of their world. So it's very important that we remember that, not only because we're learning that in the Gemara, but when it comes to these chagim, we need to actually recognize that. And that's why I love that idea of Sharon's Shavuot Seder with 4 cups of milk and the basket of fruit. I think that's brilliant because that is actually bringing to the fore something that really for 2,000 years has been, I won't say neglected, but has been of a secondary nature just because of circumstances that we weren't here in this land to do that. And now that we are, I think that's an amazing thing, and I'm very excited to do it at Shavuot. So I think that's where this Gemara is coming from. Let's just finish this little section here, and it goes on like this. So we've got the three things that have been listed here, and they're connected with the Chagim. Al shnayim mehen ma'abrin. If 2 of these concerns apply, in other words, we're worried about Aviv, we're worried about Peirot Eilan, or we're worried about the Tkufa, then Ma'abrin, we will intercalate. Va'al echad mehen, ein Ma'abrin. But if only we're worried about one of them, then we do not intercalate. Now, I'm going to stop there because that needs a great deal of understanding and explanation, because it doesn't make sense, does it? Really, on the face of it, it makes no sense. Julia, you're shaking your head vigorously. Unmute yourself and tell me why it doesn't make sense.
Well, I would have thought, but I know very little about it, that if one fits the glove, then the others would consequentially do so. But I
think that's right. And I think I would have put it in the opposite way. If one doesn't fit, in other words, if Pesach isn't going to be in the spring, in other words, it's too early, then the fruits are not going to be ripe for Shavuot, because Shavuot's going to be too early. And the Tkufa, well, actually, the Tkufa isn't going to be a problem. The Tkufa, it has to precede it. So Sukkot, we're only worried if Sukkot's a bit late, but so you're right, it's sequential. So the Gemara actually talks about that in the next bit and the bit after that. So I won't spoil it for you. Those of you who want to read on can do so. But hopefully next week we'll go into the 3 things in some more detail and drill down into why these are the most important things that the Bet Din took into account when considering intercalation. So we managed to do a couple of lines of Gemara today. That was very good. Any questions before we close? Yes, Johnny.
Just I'm bringing the first fruits to Yerushalayim. Did he bring all 7? Did he have to carry all 7? Or if you're a farmer that farmed, as you said, oranges or something else, will you have to go and buy figs somewhere?
Yeah, the mitzvah of Bikurim is on the 7 species. So if you were a farmer of oranges, that wouldn't count to bring Bikurim. Yeah. It would be a very nice thing to come and to Yerushalayim and bring your first fruits and eat them there. Your mas sheni, for example, which you have to take off all fruits. But the actual mitzvah of Bikurim applies to the Shivat Aminim.
So he would have to go and buy one of the 7 species, or
no? If you don't grow them, you don't bring them.
Oh, so you don't get
if you work in high tech, right? If you were a high tech worker back in, I'm not sure what high tech was in 2,000 years ago, but let's assume that you were a manufacturer of wheels or something for wagons, and you didn't grow anything, you weren't a farmer. Well, that mitzvah doesn't apply to you.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Yes,
it only applies to those who are growing fruit.
Growing it. Okay.
Yeah.
Just going back to the equinox. Isn't it to do with Saint Talamata when we say it in England? It's different from Israel.
Yeah, the Chutz La'aretz reason for timing for Saint Talamata is connected with the winter equinox. Yeah.
Yes.
Ronnie, you wanted to ask a question, and then you, David.
Okay, I'm not muted. Okay. My question was just a clarification about the start of Sukkot. Whether and when it comes in terms of the equinox, because I thought the equinox was this like September the 23rd, and yet Sukkot starts for many years after that.
I think the equinox is October 21st. I think.
October, right.
I think it's October 21st. I need to check it, but that off the top of my head, I believe that the equinox is around October 21st. It's definitely not in September anyway.
That's not true. Generally the equinox is March 21st and September 21st when you have the change of seasons. The solstice is December 21st and June 21st. And of course, June 21st is a very sad day because that's the day when we start losing time on the sunshine instead of daylight. Yes. So even though it's the middle of summer, it always has that sense of, oh, we waited so long to get here and now it's gone.
Now, may I say something?
Yes.
We are picking one, we just heard it. We had one single day that's been defined as this issue of equinox or solstice. How in the world did those ancient people come to the conclusion of one day? I mean, did they have some? We have it because we're modern day science here. I mean, we have no doubts about this. But what in the world did they decide that all of a sudden this is now spring? This is, I mean, what was their sign?
Okay, so the first thing to say is that they were really very, very sophisticated in their calculations of astrology and mathematics. There's a correct me if I'm wrong, David will know this. There's a Gemarah somewhere that says the
calculation,
the value of pi to I don't know how many different how many decimal points, and I think if I'm not mistaken that was Rabban Gamliel, was it not? Can't remember. It was certainly.
I think it was an Amora, but you're right. There is Gemarah.
And the other thing, Nachum, the other thing to say, Nachum, is that they were very, very attuned to this because they lived by the seasons. They would be able to tell you, they would be able to look at the sky and tell you the time to the nearest minute because of where the sun was. And we can't do that because we're deconditioned because we look at our watches. And similarly, they knew the seasons. They could smell it in the air, as it were. And these people who were working in agriculture at that time were very sophisticated in their calculations, far more sophisticated than we may imagine. So I think it was a combination of knowledge and observation that brought them to that. Yes, David Marks.
Yeah, actually, further proof on what you and Nachum have just been saying. But before I go there, you mentioned that we've got a pasuk, Shamor et Chodesh Aviv for Pesach, but there is also a pasuk that Sukkot has to come in the correct time of year. If you have a look in Kitisai, Shemot chapter 34, verse 22.
Okay, let's get it up. Shemot 34. There we go. Let's share the screen. There we are. Okay. Which verse?
22.
Okay. V'chag Shavuot taseh lecha bikurei katsir chitim. There you are. Shavuot has to be at the time when you reap the first fruits of the wheat. That's why it's called Chag HaKatzir. V'chag ha'asif tkufat hashana. Okay, the turn of the year. There we go. There's the expression tkufat. V'chag ha'asif tkufat hashana. Thank you, David. So that is the scriptural proof of the third one of our three issues that's going to intercalate the year. It has to be Chag HaAsif, which is Sukkot, has to be at Tkufat Hashana, around
and if there's a drought, if there's not enough rain, if there's a blight on the wheat and it never gets mature, that's a very vague description on the first of the wheat harvest. Well, that's so variable. I mean, the first wheat harvest could be 3 weeks later here, 4 weeks before, and especially in Israel, we have rain that's so it's just not always when you think it's going to come.
Okay, remember, Nachum, though, we are told specifically the date of Pesach. Okay. And we know that Shavuot is 49 days of counting of the Omer. So we know that Shavuot is 50 days after Pesach. Now we know the date of Pesach. This sounds like a maths question, doesn't it, in O-level? You know the date of Pesach. You know that Shavuot is 50 days later. So therefore, you know the date of Shavuot. What this is telling us is that it needs to coincide with that time of year where the festival of where the wheat harvest is going on. And that is exactly the point, Nachum. The point that you make is exactly the point of our Gemarah. Because if the 50 days after Pesach turns out in the middle of March, well, we know that it can't be right, because the festival of wheat, not the festival of wheat, the harvest of wheat doesn't take place in the middle of March. So we must have got it all wrong. It's a guide to us. We know when the date of Shavuot is. It's 50 days after the 15th of Nisan. So it's not an issue of the date. What this is telling us, this is the source for the idea that we have a luni-solar system and not just a purely lunar system. We have a luni-solar system, and these psukim that I've mentioned and that David has mentioned to us and has shown us are the proofs of the luni-solar system that is in use. Ronnie, you've still got your hand up. Is that an old hand or a new hand? That's an old hand. Okay. Anyone else before we go? David?
Yes. So just going back to Nachum's point about how did they know, something that you quoted in your presentation on Motzei Shabbat from Mishnah in Avodat Zarah about the winter solstice festival, the origin of the winter solstice festival. In fact, there's an even older one quoted in the Gemarah there, which is one of the first sources of Hanukkah. That is based on a tradition that Adam Harishon, saw the days getting shorter and shorter, and he was very concerned that the end of the world was coming, and he fasted, and then suddenly he saw there was a change and the days started getting longer. And that is the source of a celebration at the midpoint of the winter, showing that the days were getting longer, and i.e. a rebirth.
Yeah, that's thank you for bringing that up. That's a famous Gemarah that, yeah, Adam Arishan thought that the days were just going to get shorter and shorter and shorter, and then it would just all be black. Well, you can understand that. You know, how would he know that they were going to get longer again? So that's the origin of most of the religions. Most of the religions have a festival of light in the winter, and it's to celebrate the fact that, you know, we've got to the darkest point of the year, and now we're going to hopefully move forward into a lighter. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other points before we go? Okay, we'll see you next week. Have a good week, everyone.
Thanks.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.